Good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Bankers, joined by Micah Kurtz this morning, who's going to tell us a little bit about strength and conditioning, a little bit about sports administration. But before we get into that, Micah, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of background of who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, definitely awesome to be on. I appreciate you inviting me on. And I'm Micah Kurtz. I'm the Director of Sports Performance and Assistant AD at Windermere Prep School in Orlando, Florida. Just finishing up my second year, where in my position I design a strength and conditioning athletic development program for all of our kids, really ages 5th grade all the way through 12th grade. And like I said, I'm just finishing my second year. Before that, I was actually at a high school in Columbia, South Carolina, AC Flora High School. Started the school's first ever full-time strength and conditioning position. Was there for 10 years. Had an unbelievable experience. Never really envisioned myself being in the high school sector. I think like a lot of guys that are interested in strength and conditioning, like as they're coming up and in school or in college, they're thinking about being a collegiate or maybe a pro strength coach or private sector. Like high school, there's not that many of them right now. It's growing, but I was a grad assistant strength coach at the University of South Carolina, and my goal was to be a collegiate or a pro strength coach. And I kind of met the AD and the principal at my former school, AC Flora, and they were described to me the position they wanted to create, this full-time strength and conditioning position. I thought I'd do it for a year or two and then look at other opportunities, and ended up staying there for 10 years and really I really fell in love with the high school sector, where I think we all know that these kids, this is the most formidable years of the kids' lives, and the impact you can make is unbelievable. And it's probably the biggest impact that you can make it being around them for, I'm around these kids now for 4, 5, 6, 7 years of their most formidable years. So it's been awesome. So, definitely been a great experience at both schools that I've been at, for sure.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking to Micah Kurtz. If you have questions for him, just put them in your chat box and we'll make sure he gets them. We were talking just before the stream started about just the fact that high schools don't normally have a full-time position for strength and conditioning, and you're in a situation where that exists. So tell us a little bit about what your roles and responsibilities are. For example, do you teach? Do you have teaching responsibilities? How many students do you actually work with on a daily basis?
Yeah. So, and at all schools, it's a little bit different. And I teach weightlifting classes in the high school. I teach 3, we're block scheduled. I teach three 90-minute weightlifting classes that are really open to all students if they want to be involved in our strength and conditioning program, whether they're an athlete or whether they're not. It's open to all of them. And so I generally have between 20 to 30 students per class. And then, like I said, we're AB day schedule. So I have about 100 students total, at least 100 students total that I see throughout the week. And then I also work with all of the sports teams before and after school as well, whichever kids are not in our weightlifting class. So we run generally 3 to 4 groups a day after school and 45-minute to hour sessions. So I really probably see anywhere from 300 to 400 students per week. And again, that's one of the things about the importance of having a full-time strength coach, is because, I think myself, and I've been lucky that I have 2 assistants as well that are pretty much just volunteer assistants. But we have the biggest reach of any coach or teacher or administrator in the entire school, where we're seeing 300 to 400 kids face to face and having those daily interactions with them every single day. And obviously everybody, the football coach, obviously extremely important position, has been placed a big emphasis at a lot of schools, especially down here in Florida, where football is a major sport. But they could see, if they have at a big school, if they have 80, 90 kids on their team, they're seeing 80, 90 kids throughout the week. And at a full-time strength coach, they're seeing anywhere from 200, 300, 400 kids throughout the week. So the impact that you can have is huge. It could be positive or negative, but I think that's definitely a reason that it's really important to invest in creating a position like mine, in which I'm blessed to work at Windermere Prep. That definitely places a big value on what we do as strength and conditioning coaches.
Yeah, just the idea of 300-400 kids coming through your weight room every week is kind of a reminder that you have that influence, but also you've got to know those kids. I mean, that's a lot of names to learn. That's a lot of personalities, a lot of finding out how they're motivated, what pushes them, how far to push them. How do you do that? Do you have a system where you get to know the athletes coming through your weight room?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, one of the big things that we talk about in our program daily is that, like, I mean, I want to create an environment that pulls out the best from each kid, and we have a lot of times people talk about pushing kids to be their best, but I mean, we want to create an environment that's friendly, that's welcoming, and they feel safe, but they also want to take big, courageous risks, and so we want to pull those great moments out of them. And so, like you said, it all depends on how you coach that kid and how you know that kid. And so again, I'm there all day, every day, from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. at night. So I'm able to really get to know those kids. And we do a lot where we create questionnaires in the beginning of the year, which goes into a lot of detail about their personal background, and I mean, ask them questions about themselves, their family, things that maybe somebody might not know about them. But also, one of the big questions I have is how do you like to be coached? Like, do you like to be to if you're not doing something right, do you want me to call you out in front of everybody, or are you somebody that wants me to pull you to the side? Do you like somebody who's brings energy and in your face, and or do you want somebody that's going to coach you a little bit quieter and more on a personal level? So again, that's huge with dealing with that many kids, being able to see how each individual student and each individual athlete likes to be pushed, because I mean, I think we all have heard people talk about as we get older, oh, kids are different nowadays. Kids are soft nowadays. They're not like we were when we used to play sports. But they may be different, but that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. It's just we as coaches need to adjust how we coach. And just because your title as coach doesn't automatically mean that kid's going to run through a wall for you and do everything you need. And probably when I was growing up, whatever my coach said went, and I didn't question him. But now kids, they are a little bit different, but it's not a bad thing. They want to know the why behind what you do. And so that's another big thing is, I mean, I want to explain the why behind everything that we do in our program, so that they know the reason. And it's not just because I'm not just telling them to squat 5 sets of 5 that day because I just feel like I just like squatting and I'm telling them to squat. It's because of they understand all of the benefits of everything that we do in our program.
Yeah, and I want to come back to periodization in a little bit, because you work with so many different sports. I can imagine that's a bit of a handful. But one of the things you talked about was, how do you like to be coached? And that's a great question. I think a lot of coaches don't necessarily do that. It's my way or the highway, so to speak. You mentioned all the, let me know how you want to be pushed and when you're doing something wrong. There's also, when they're doing something right. And so how do you kind of make student athletes aware of good performances and things that motivate them to achieve new goals?
Yeah, great question. And that's another thing that I talk in the very beginning of the year. I mean, I say, especially for our weightlifting class, number one, I tell them, which is a little off topic of your question, but number one, I tell them, welcome to the most important class that you're ever going to take in high school. And they kind of laugh at it. And they're like, this is not calculus. This is not science class. But again, I mean, I think what we can teach in a going through a strength and conditioning program and workout program, like the things that you can teach, they can benefit them for the rest of their life, and goes well beyond just getting healthier. Like overcoming obstacles and goal setting. But to go back to your original question, I mean, I talked to them also about, hey, I'm either going to be your biggest fan, your biggest cheerleader, or you're going to be somebody that maybe I annoy you or you don't always like, because I'm going to hold you to high standards. And if you're doing what you're supposed to do and you have accomplishments, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader, and we're going to celebrate that stuff. And so, I mean, I go out of my way to be over the top, probably a little bit on social media, and shouting out my kids anytime that they do anything great. And I want to make sure that they see it. And really, our school's kind of embraced the whole social media, where probably not even 2-3 years ago, it was kind of tabooed. Like, don't let your students follow you on Twitter. Don't let them follow you on Instagram, where there needs to be that separation. But now everybody understands that's a way that you can build that connection. And so, I mean, I promote my students to, hey, go follow me on social media, go follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and everything. And I follow them, and everything that they do, I'm going to give them a shout out. And kids, I mean, as we all know, that kids are big into social media, and seeing them getting that instant shout out is huge for them. And so whether it's them getting a PR in the weight room or them doing something in their individual sport and me posting about that, it's huge. And then also we got in our newspapers, like we have a community newspaper, and then obviously the Orlando newspaper. Anytime any of our athletes are in the newspaper, I clip that out and I post that on the windows right outside the weight room. And it gets pretty cool over throughout the year as those windows get completely filled up, and you see parents and students and walking by and looking at the windows of the weight room with all of those accolades up there. And I make sure I tell all of our students, hey, if you're in the newspaper, let me know, because I wanna post you up. I want to put you in our weight room and shout you out. So I mean, all of that stuff is huge, and I think we as adults sometimes don't realize how much it really means to kids to get that even if it's a little bit of a shout out on social media or anything like that. Like, it's huge, and it goes a long way for them to believing in what you're doing, and them understanding that another thing that we talk about a lot is I want them to know that I want the best for them. I don't want the best from them. I want them to know that I want the absolute best for them. And when they know that my number one goal is to make them the best in everything they do, and that's the only reason, that's what my job is, it goes a long way for them buying in and to believing in and building that trust in your program.
Talk a little bit about periodization, because you oversee a variety of different sports. You oversee a variety of different ages. And I was actually watching a video of you just before this stream talking about this idea that, look, not every 14-year-old is the same. We have to differentiate based on their abilities, their maturation. So how do you do that, given that you have 300-400 athletes? You've got to manage all of them and know when they come in the weight room what they're supposed to be doing. Do you have software? Do you have some kind of plan? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's definitely an evolving process over time, and especially it's changed a ton over the last 10-12 years that I've been at the high school level. And I truly believe that programming for the high school level, I mean, I'll put it as challenging, if not more challenging, than any other level, whether it's collegiate or pro, because we can, at any time, I mean, in our after school groups, we could have up to 40-50 kids in our weight room, and I could have a 13-year-old all the way up to an 18-year-old in the weight room. I could have a kid that has trained with me for 4 years and a kid that's never trained with me before. And so what I talk about is we have a unified strength and conditioning program, where it's unified, where they're all training towards the same athletic development goals, which is our 5 core values. Number 1 is we want to protect the athlete. Everything we do in the weight room is designed to protect them from getting injured, obviously in the weight room, but also to protect them from getting injured in the sport that they play. Number 2 is they need to be able to move well. They need to have good basic fundamental movement patterns, good mobility, good stability. They need to be able to master those movements, body weight movements, before progressing in our program. And then number 3, once they do have that good fundamental movement pattern, good mobility and good stability, we want them to get stronger and let's move strong. And it doesn't matter if they play tennis or if they play football, if they can move well and add a strength base to themselves, they're gonna get better in the sport that they play. Number 4, want them to move fast, so we're gonna always incorporate some type of linear speed and some type of agility into our programs. And number 5, it was listed last, but it's probably the most important, is I want them to thrive. I want to use the weight room to build that confidence and to have them thrive in all areas of life. And so those are the core values, and they're all training towards that, where it's unified, but it's not uniform where they're all doing the exact same thing, because again, they're different sports, they're different age levels, they're different strength levels. So we kind of have progressions and regressions where, say, if they're squatting for that day, depending on where they are in our training system, one athlete could be doing a back squat, one could be doing a front squat, one could be doing a goblet squat, one could be doing a bodyweight squat. One, if they don't have good mobility, they might be doing a rear foot elevated squat. So they're all training towards the same goal, and they're all kind of doing the same movement, but there's progressions based on their age, their trust level, their training experience, their strength capacity, their relative strength level. And so again, there's a lot of there's a lot going on, but it's probably not as confusing as I made it to seem. But there's a lot of factors that I need to take into consideration. And then even on top of that, I mean, at the high school level especially, I mean, much more than the pro and the collegiate level, is you got multiple sport athletes. So so I could have in our football group, where say we have majority of football players in one of our class, a lot of them could be lacrosse players and baseball players as well. And so are we going to train them the same in the spring as a kid who's only playing football? So we've got to take into considerations that long-term athletic development and training them in season and off season, but still continually getting them to train towards those athletic development goals throughout the entire year.
Well, if anybody's watching, Micah Kurtz is joining us. If you have questions for him about strength and conditioning or life in sports administration in a high school, put them in your chat box. Well, I want to transition a little bit away from being in the weight room and look at, you talked about your day being kind of a 12-hour plus day. How do you balance life with a job that requires so much time in the school system, in the gym? You know, what do you do to kind of moderate this idea that, you know, theoretically you could just live in the gym? Yeah,
it's interesting, as I'm a relatively newly married and new baby. I mean, I've been married almost 2 years. Our anniversary is the end of July, and our baby actually just turned 1 last week. So I mean, I got used to, I mean, and especially, and another thing about the high school level is there's some people that come to the high school level because they think that, oh, well, I was working at the collegiate level and putting in all these hours, and now I'm going to go to the high school level and just work a normal day and have summers off. And is there potential that you could do that? Yes, but if you really believe in what you do and are invested in what you do, you're gonna put in much longer days than the traditional school day, and you're definitely, especially if you're a coach or a strength coach, you're going to be working the summers as well. And so really, I mean, I've got used to working 12, 13-hour days, especially when I was single and didn't have a baby at home. And it's been great being home now during this quarantine and having much more time seeing my baby grow. But I think one thing that I started to do before the quarantine and going to do much more when we get back to normal is there is some downtime in the middle of the day, and my wife is blessed to we're blessed that my wife doesn't have to work full time right now, and just having her and the baby come up and hang out in our weight room and during lunchtime and in a little bit of a downtime. And I'm blessed to be at a school that that does, as long they believe in me and they trust that I'm doing my job, and they don't put away where, hey, you can't have your wife and your baby up for a few minutes during the day. And so so my baby was coming up for about an hour during the day for the couple months before the quarantine, and now obviously as she's getting older, she'll be able to get around a little bit more, as long as my wife gives me the go ahead to allow her, when we get back in the weight room, to allow her back in the weight room if there's no everybody's got to be a little nervous about this COVID virus, but yeah, just incorporating the whole bring my wife Whitney and the baby Mia up and have them hang out. And I think it goes a long way, especially at the high school level, to have your students see you interacting with your wife and your baby, and they see you in a little bit of a different light. And again, it goes a big way to develop that connection with your students.
Great point. Looking then at, stress and burnout is, I think, an important part, because you do spend so much time in a job, and a lot of us do that, and we all have those challenges. So making it part of what you do kind of makes it part of your family's vocation as well as your own, instead of my life's here, our life is over here, let's keep
Yeah.
Modeling in sports is an interesting topic, because as a strength and conditioning coach, there's maybe the perception that you have to model what you're preaching, right? Do you practice what you preach? And do you feel that pressure from the athletes that come into your weight room, where it's kind of a, you're telling me to do all this stuff, I bet he can't do it kind of attitude. Do you feel that pressure? I know you work out and stay fit and healthy, but do you feel that pressure of, what, I need to show everybody that I know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I'm blessed where I'm still relatively young, and I mean, I still train, and I still am in pretty good shape. Not as good as I once was, but I mean, I can get under the bar and do any type of movement that I ask my students to do, any Olympic movement. But there is that always that thought process with me, for sure, where as I get older, like, I mean, a strength coach, as you mentioned, burnout, I mean, strength and conditioning coaches is a young man's game, and you don't see many 60-year-old strength coaches. And what is the reason? Is it because they get burned out, or is it because of what you mentioned, that do they feel the pressure of, hey, I can't be telling my kids, my athletes, whatever level you're at, what to do if I can't do it? But I mean, I think it all comes down to, I mean, if you're somebody that your students or your athletes or whatever level you work with, like, they know that you're a lifelong learner, and they know that you're continually learning the best methods to coach them up. And then definitely that you have that ability to continually connect with them and find out what makes them tick and develop that trustworthy relationship. I mean, they're gonna do everything you ask of them. But I definitely think that it goes to say that you need to somewhat look the part. Like, whether as you get older, as you get 50, 60 years old, you're not going to look like a 21-year-old athlete. But as long as they know that, hey, you're still doing everything in your power to stay healthy, but you have that knowledge, and you're continually learning that, and that wisdom that's going to help take them to their promised land. And that promised land is that desirable but difficult to achieve future that they want. And so just always being able to connect with them to find out what their promised land is, and them knowing that you're the best person possible to help them reach it.
Talk a little bit then to professional development. You mentioned it just now in terms of, you need to stay current and up to date. What are some things that you do to make sure that you're on top of the knowledge base that continues to grow?
Yeah. I mean, and that's what's has helped me grow tremendously as a coach, really, in the last 5-6 years, as I've gotten extremely involved in a lot of organizations. I was the state director in South Carolina for the National High School Strength Coaches Association. I was the state director for the NSCA, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and And as I got more involved in those organizations and as I continued to attend conferences, it probably wasn't even the content that I learned at the conferences was great. But the connections that I got from those networking events and meeting those coaches is something that's continually helped me grow as a coach. And again, I think we as coaches, you don't want to like post yourself on social media and kind of be boastful, but I think it goes a long ways for me to post on my social media that, hey, I'm going to this conference. I've been honored to learn from this guy at this conference, or even as you get a little bit more opportunities and you're able to speak at conferences and post, hey, it was a great experience speaking about my awesome athletes at this conference. That goes a long way for your athletes to see that you're continually learning and you want the best for them, and you're doing everything in your power to keep learning, to give them the best experience and the best opportunities possible. So, I mean, and even going further, where I talked about how the people that I've met at those conferences, I think the number one advice I would give for any young coaches that are listening, or college students, or anything that want to be in this field is, like I said, the past 5 years have probably been where I've learned the most. And I was been going to conferences for the past 10 years, but probably those first 5 years, I was the guy who went to the conference, sat in the back of the room, filled up my notebook with everything, thought I was doing a great job learning, but I never went and spoke to any of the coaches that were there or the presenters. And I would recommend, I mean, build that network and meet those coaches, especially in the strength and conditioning field. Like, it's unbelievable how much coaches are willing to share. And I've learned so much from these coaches just by getting on a phone call with them or going to meet with them. And I mean, I think one of the biggest eye openers was for me, and I think this was right about 5 years ago. My brother was living in South Florida, and I was like, I was going down there to visit him, and I was like, I'm gonna try and meet up with some coaches down there. And I emailed Bill Ferran, the legendary longtime strength coach of the Miami Heat. Well, I didn't even email him. I sent him a message through LinkedIn. Who knows how many people like read those messages? And I was like, hey, I'm down here. I'm coming down to South Florida. I would love to meet with you and learn from you. And he sent me a message back, and he was like, yeah, let's set it up. And we exchanged a couple messages, and he was like, gave me the go ahead, and emailed me some pass to show the Miami Heat security guard. I pulled in, and there's Maseratis all over the parking lot. And I'm like, I'm here to meet Coach Bill Ferran. And the security guard like walked me up just like to the back entrance, and then was like, the weight room's 2 doors down on the right. And I walked in, and LeBron James was probably about 15 feet away from me training, and never had met Bill Ferran, had no idea who I was. He took me back in his office, and we talked for an hour and a half, all things strength and conditioning. And he's become an unbelievable mentor to me that now I not only consider a mentor, but consider a friend. And again, it would have never, like, I mean, he won 2 national championships with the Miami Hurricanes, and then he's been part of all 3 of the Miami Heat's world championships. I mean, he's one of the most accomplished strength coaches of all time. And for him to not just out of the blue have no idea who I was, to invite me to their facility and talk. I mean, and again, if you don't reach out and try to make those connections, I mean, you're never really gonna learn and get a friend or a mentor like that. So I mean, that's something that definitely went a long ways in my career for sure.
Yeah, you make a great point in that. Sometimes we have to put ourselves out there and be okay with rejection and the no, I'm not interested, or for whatever reason you don't get that connection. But a lot of times we do get those connections. And a couple of weeks ago we were talking with Coach Storms, the strength and conditioning coach at FSU, And he even said, I respond to every email, every phone call myself.
Yeah.
And, he talked about this idea of coaches being open to talking with, apprentices, so to speak. But a lot of those times the apprentices aren't prepared to actually have that conversation. And I think that goes to, are you actually doing your work? Are you getting your training? Are you getting your professional development? So when that opportunity does arise, like you had, you can have a conversation as opposed to, well, I never thought you would reach out to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to say now. And so it's a great story to hear, just in seeing how this can work if you're willing to make the effort.
Yeah.
And I'll also add that a speaker just recently talked about the fact that a lot of us have been mentored by people. You talked about it yourself, and it's our responsibility as well to turn the other way and be willing to mentor other people who are coming up as well. So there's kind of that dual responsibility. My last question is, unless other people have questions, you talked a little bit about advice for people kind of coming into the industry. Do you have any other suggestions for them in terms of how they can be successful and see longevity in the career?
Yeah, I think 100%. Just what we talked about with developing a network, and especially if you're interested in the high school level and being a strength and conditioning at the high school level, like we talked about. I mean, there's still a lot of schools that don't have full-time strength coaches, but
Yeah.
I've given this presentation a few times about just like the future of high school strength and conditioning, and did a little bit of research. And I mean, there's like 35,000 high schools in the US approximately. And through my research, I mean, it was less than 10% of them have a full-time strength coach. So that's potentially, as it continues to grow, that's potentially 25,000 jobs that could be created in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And as much as I do, the strength and conditioning profession, there's way more people that want to be strength coaches than there are jobs. So if you're interested in being a strength coach, I mean, the high school sector could be a sector that's continually growing. And to that point, the people that are in the schools and the people that are involved in the schools, like, we hear about these jobs well before they're posted. So again, as you go and make these connections and say, hey, maybe I would be interested in being in the high school sector, get to know, or even volunteer, but get to know the strength coaches in the area that are there, or get to know the sport coaches in the area, get to know the athletic director in the area, because they're the ones that obviously, when these positions do come about, they're going to be like, hey, I know this guy's been talking to me about it for the last 6 months or so. Let me reach out to him and see if he'd be interested. And he's one of the first people that they interview. And definitely, even going further than that, get to know the community as well. If you have a community, an area of the country that you want to work in, I mean, some of the biggest stakeholders in the school are some of the influential, either businessmen or influential parents in that school community, and they're people that can be a great resource and a great asset for that going to the school to try and help you get hired or help you get that position. And then even going further than that, as we talk about trying to get these positions in schools, talk about the value that you can bring to the school beyond getting the students bigger, faster, stronger, reducing injuries, improving their sports specific performance. Like, yeah, everybody knows that's what a strength coach is. What they're thought of as what their main job is, to get them bigger, faster, stronger, and improve their sports performance. But talk about other ways, especially at the high school, talk about other ways that you can create value where I mean, it's been proven that exercise and wellness improves cognitive ability in adolescent students. So I mean, I talk all the time, and even in my classes, we do reflective essays about how my students feel after class and how they feel in their class right after my class, and do they feel like they perform better? And the overwhelming majority of them say, hey, I feel more alert, I feel more energized, I feel like I do better in my class after weightlifting class. And I mean, I show that to administration, and that shows that what we do is also enhancing learning. And then also all of the benefits of exercise and wellness, how is it reduces depression and reduces anxiety. And especially I think the biggest sector of demographic that has some type of depression is teenage girls. And the majority of teenage girls, if they're not playing a sport, aren't doing anything for physical activity. And if you can say, hey, I want to create this comprehensive long-term athletic development program, work with all of the students, all of the demographics, and show, hey, this is also going to help reduce anxiety, reduce depression rates. Talk to the guidance counselors about how, as they all know so much about mental health and mental awareness, and talk about the benefits of that. And then even further, I'm at a private school. And so by us having a full-time qualified strength coach, where all of these kids, I mean, are going to get quality, a well-developed strength and conditioning program, but through going to our school, that's something that we can kind of use as an advantage versus other schools that may not have this position. Because if a kid's looking at a school to play sports, I mean, 90% of them, we all know the benefits of strength and conditioning. 90% of them, if they're serious about football or basketball or baseball, they're doing some type of training. And if it's not offered, if they don't have a quality program at that school, then they're going to a private facility. And we can say, hey, you don't have to go to that private facility. We have all of that in-house. And that's a way that you could save $10,000, $15,000 in private facility costs of going to your personal trainer. You're going to get that at our school, where, again, that could be a way that you could talk to your administration and say, hey, well, now if you're talking about this is the price tag of our school, but they also have a private personal trainer, there's a way where, hey, maybe you get this, you're actually looking at a reduced cost because you're not having to pay those extra costs. So those are all ways to kind of like talk to schools that are maybe thinking about creating a position, and how it can benefit every area of academics, of mental health, and of, if you're at a school that provides that costs tuition, that maybe it's going to be prospective parents and students are going to look at it and say, well, maybe that price tag is not as high because this school offers all these other things.
It's a great point. If somebody does want to get in touch with you, has some more questions, you talked about social media, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm big on social media, Twitter and Instagram. My handle is at Kurtz M3, Kurtz M3. Hit me up for sure. I would love to connect with everybody, and if I can be a resource at all, I'd be honored to. And then also, like you talked about, Tim, definitely I want to make connections with you as well. So hopefully if you're connecting with me, bring some good questions and some stuff that we can both learn from each other, and don't just be a fly on the wall like I was when I was first starting in my career.
That's great advice. Micah, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your experiences with us, and do appreciate your insight.
Yeah, that's awesome to be on. I appreciate everything you're doing. This platform and this show is awesome for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, just a reminder that coming up, we have more guests this week. Hope you join us for those. Starting with 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, Michael Holzer is the assistant coach of men's soccer at Iona College. He'll be talking about his experiences in amateur, semi-pro soccer, and then also collegiate soccer. Then we stay with soccer on Thursday. This is one I'm going to be very interested in. The general manager of OKC Energy FC is going to be talking about running a professional sports organization. Should be a lot of interesting insight there. I'm excited about that one. And then last of all, Kyle Stevenson from Georgia State will be talking about how he coaches track and field. a lot of different disciplines in track and field, therefore a lot of different periodizations and roles and responsibilities in that job. But from myself, Tim Baghurst, and Micah Kurtz, thanks you so much for watching.
Appreciate it.